Did you miss episode 3? Why don't you go back and download it and listen to it now? Here's a clip. It's with my old buddy JoJo, the producer. Just kind of like in the middle, you know, some of the stuff he did I like, some of the stuff I say, well, what the hell was he thinking, kind of thing. But that episode, I think the second time you had him on was like your biggest episode ever, right?
Chris DiPetrollo, yeah, that was pretty successful, and he came on and promoted, that his company, I believe it's Figures Toy Inc., pretty well known for putting out wrestling figures. They do the Ring of Honor figures now. They just put out a Legends line, or are beginning to put it out with like Jim Cornette, Blue Meanie. I think New Jack is going to get a figure, Cliff Compton, and guys like that. So, yeah, they really captured that niche, and they're getting some figures out there that people have wanted for a while, and guys you figure you wouldn't see because they're not on a contract or whatever. They also, if you listen to the show, they kind of had a little issue with WWE because they had the rights to Kevin Steen's first action figure, and they also put out an AJ Styles figure just as he was debuting. So there's a little heat back and forth there, but they're doing good business, and like I said, they're putting out what the customers want. So I definitely approve of Figures Inc. And yeah, it's a good episode. Chris DiPetrollo is the gentleman's name.
Yeah, I looked at some of the new figures, and I'm just, especially the Blue Meanie and the Jim Cornette figure, they do such a good job. And listening to Cornette, apparently it was very popular.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's start the party.
It's time for another episode of Shootin' The Shiznit, live from STS Studios here in St. Louis, Missouri. This is episode 52. I want to thank everyone for listening last week. We had a total of 37K downloads. Thanks to all my guests. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to everybody that promotes it. It's just really cool getting the response that we do. If you're brand new to Shootin' The Shiznit, this Thursday we'll have the Cool Kids Countdown. It gets a bi-weekly schedule every other Thursday. And next Thursday we'll have Who Wants to Be the Best Shiznitter Ever, which is our game show podcast. That's right, Wrestling Game Show Podcast. If you don't have never listened to it, go back to Thursday and listen to last week's episode. It's pretty awesome. I just want to put something over real quick. Facebook, we got a new site for Facebook, and it's only for me to promote some of the merch that we have, and also we want to promote the episodes there. If you want to talk wrestling, you go to Cool Kids Countdown, or Cool Kids Wrestling MMA Talk Facebook group. It's the Cool Kids Wrestling and MMA Talk Facebook group. I'll say that for the third time. You can go there, and if you ask to get in, we'll let you be in. If you're an ass, we'll kick you out. That's where we talk about wrestling. You'll go to Shootin', that's without the G, Shootin' The Shiznit, SHOOTINTHESHIZNIT. Go there, do a search for that on Facebook. We're going to put up every episode there, and you can go there and comment on the episode. Does that sound cool or what? I want to put over my podcast bros, Suplex City Limits, Creative Control with JoJo, and Keeping It 100 with Conan, JoJo, Disco, and Kevin Gill. Guys, no further BS. Let's bring on our guest. To come on from the green room. Come on over, Bill. He's been in there eating cookies and milk. Join us
no,
here.
I always like to eat cookies. The milk is not that good.
Bill, it's Bill. Also, go ahead.
It was milk. It was my favorite drink called sparkling ice. That's what I was having with the cookies.
Oh, there we go, instead of milk. We got Lance, too. Lance is joining us for this Tuesday edition of Shootin' The Shiznit, which is kind of weird, but, Lance, I want him to be my co-host tonight, help me talk to the infamous Bill Apter.
Well, I have a question for Lance, actually.
Oh, okay.
All right, Bill.
See, absolutely. Back here, it's Lance LeVine, but back here in the East, you'd be Lance LeVine.
Yep. I've heard every mispronunciation under the sun, so it's fine. I mean, you're lucky. Your last name is only 5 letters, so it's easy to pronounce.
Which is the real one?
It's Levine, sir.
Okay, Levine. All right.
I gotta say, it's an absolute honor to have you on here. Absolute
honor. Too. I enjoy the show.
Awesome. I want to tell you, Bill, I know you remember me, sarcasm there, but as a child, I was big into Pro Wrestling Illustrated, as all wrestling fans were. And then when I started taking photos in the Memphis area, you did publish a couple of my photographs.
Now, hold on. Now, I kept saying when we were talking a few times to set this up that your name sounded familiar, and now I got you. Now I know who you are. Exactly.
And you sent me money, and I wished, that was just the craziest thing, that I was getting money for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I'm 18, 19 years old, but I did have a couple of really good shots where I decided I wanted to shoot black and white, and you used those, so I do appreciate that. I
got to tell you something. About the photography thing. During the day, beside doing OneWrestling.com full-time, I work for a nonprofit agency called Ahead, and we help people with disabilities to find jobs. We job coach, etc. And about 3 months ago, a lovely young girl, and you wouldn't even know she had a disability, came in for an intake. She was probably about 22 years old, and I said, "What's your goal? What's your dream?" She didn't know anything about me, and she says, "Well, I want to do photography." And I said, "Well, that's amazing, because I can probably help work with you." And I told her what I used to do. And then she asked me the question. I never feel old, but she finally hit it. She asked me the question that actually made me feel old. She said, "That thing you mentioned, what is film?" True story.
Love it. Yeah, I remember I had I actually took those photographs on a 110 camera in black and white just so you could use them, Bill. You sent me a letter and you said, and they need to be black and white. It's better if they're black and white. Blah blah blah. You'll get published. That's what you told me. I could get
because color. When people shot color pictures, most of the pictures in the magazine at that point were black and white, and if you sent in color, it just didn't reproduce as well as the black and white stuff would.
Yeah, that's what you told me. Yeah, that's pretty much what you told me. You said, I would get a better chance if I sent in a good, clear black and white photo. And I think I got 2 or 3, and then I got tired of shooting black and white. So
what were they? What were they? What was
I think if I can remember right, it was of Lawler. So I made a lot of pictures of Jerry Lawler and it was from a spot show. I went to Blytheville, Arkansas every Friday night and took photographs. And then eventually got inside with Memphis Wrestling, was able to take as many pictures as I wanted. And Lawler was fantastic with me taking photos and helped me, But I made them for myself. I got where I just, put them in I still got a bunch of them that I took, the best ones put up, that I made right there in Blytheville, Arkansas, of all places. So.
Well, one of the best marriages in the entire business was the marriage of Jerry Lawler and a camera pointed toward him.
And a microphone.
Was Paul Heyman, did he get his start working for you, Bill?
Well, no, he was shooting. He actually started befriending people in the business like Fred Blassie, Captain Lou Albano, and the Grand Wizard. He just kind of ran errands for them, and Vince McMahon Sr. He was just like a gopher guy, and he would take pictures backstage at the Westchester County Center in White Plains, and then eventually around the Garden. But I think he published his own fanzine first before he actually sent them out. And at some of the shows, he would just hand me pictures, and he'd say, "Use them if you want to." And he always signed his name down on the bottom right-hand side. And it was called, I believe, his fanzine was called The Wrestling Times. And he was, I mentioned in both my book, Is Wrestling Fixed? I Didn't Know It Was Broken, and on the WWE DVD about Paul Heyman, that he was kind of like a pain in the butt, because I'd be set up, but George Napolitano would be set up to get this great shot, and he would elbow his way in. But he really was a very nice kid, very polite and very respectful to everyone.
Also, I bought his book. I exchanged with him or something. He had come up with a thick thicker, not regular paper, but thicker paper, black and white book that he put out, just his photographs. And then when he came to Memphis, I was taking photos at Blavel, and he was managing Sid Vicious as Humongous.
Yeah.
And Lawler looks at me, and I hadn't been backstage or anything at that point that night. He looks at me, and he looks over at Paul, and he goes, "Do you know who that is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's Paul Heyman." And Heyman goes crazy. How do you know who I am? I mean, here we are in Arkansas.
Yeah.
How did this guy know who I was? But as soon as I told him my name, he was like, "Yeah, you bought one of my books." And I was like, "Yeah." But yeah, he was just, and that's why I think that we still as fans like him so much, is because we all also know he was such a fan. And that's one thing about you.
Yeah, he comes from the old school.
Right, right.
We know it. So that's always going to be a part of him. That was his roots, and that's what got him to where he is today, because so many of the guys today that have been successful, they've got some old school roots in them. And the best one of all, who really knows how to juggle the old school with the new school, is Triple H. Mm-hmm. He's made a perfect marriage between old school and new school.
Yeah, how did I know that was the name you were going to say? As you were getting ready for that setup, I knew that
it's
was
the sign I held up here on Skype.
It is interesting because he definitely has opened up, bringing back some of the old ways that so many fans have walked away from because they're missing the old version of the business. But he's bringing a lot of those elements back again. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at it, when you look at NXT and 205 Live and now the Mae Young tournament, he's really brought, and the UK thing that's going on as well, he's really brought independent wrestling, wrestling on a not that big, gigantic level to the WWE network. And a lot of fans are just like, hey, this stuff, just like the indies. So the indie fans have somewhere to go. WWE.
The thing about it is, with NXT, it does remind me of old wrestling, not wrestling or something that, we used to watch. And I think that's why we got so many fans. Lance is prepared. I never prepare anything, Bill. I'm a call it in the ring kind of guy, but Lance has got some questions he really wants to ask you. So I'm going to let him have the floor for a minute here.
You know what? That's what I'm here for.
All right, it sounds good. When I found out that we were going to be lucky enough to have you tonight, I had a couple things that I just wanted to ask. First off, like I said, totally stoked to have you because you represent all of our childhoods in a different way, than the actual wrestlers do. You represent so much of our childhood. So just really cool to have you on. So a couple things that I was wondering. Give me a regret. You had such a long, storied career in wrestling journalism.
Okay.
Do you have any regrets?
The regret is that I never got to the spot I wanted to be in, like a Gene Okerlund type of role, the backstage interviewer, on a steady basis. I got to do it for Jim Crockett Promotions when I had my the Pro Wrestling Illustrated scouting reports there. I got to do it on Joe Pedicino's Pro Wrestling This Week. I got to do it on Georgia Championship Wrestling. But my regret is that, and I'm still after it, my regret is that to this day, I still don't have that steady backstage interviewer gig. If you read my book, several years ago, they brought me down, Triple H brought me down to the Performance Center to do the pilot show that eventually became the JBL Legends show. So I almost had the opportunity to have my own show on the network. But I believe they just wanted to go with, a house guy who everybody knew at that point, and he was a very good choice too. But yeah, the regret is that I haven't gotten to that place yet.
Do you think, you bring up a point, would you ever be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame?
Well, of course, that would be the highlight of anyone's career in this business. Many years ago, I was joking around with Triple H, and I said, so when am I getting into the Hall of Fame? And he said, well, we got to find a reason to do it. And then I realized that the global audience that watches WWE, not all of them are familiar with me, especially the younger people coming in. But it was shortly after that that I started to become a talking head on many of the WWE documentaries, like the Monday Night War, the Paul Heyman one, the True Giants one. So little by little, they're giving their audience little tastes of me. And now that they're bringing in the AWA shows and the World Class shows and the WCW shows and the NWA shows, I'm on so many of those, either shooting pictures or giving out awards. So, it would be wonderful to be inducted, but they'd have to create a category, I guess, for media. And if I get in, George Napolitano needs to be represented as well. And the crew of PWI.
Meltzer's never going to get in, so I think they would.
Say that. No, you can't say that because the mentality has changed at WWE. True. At one time, it was if you talked to Dave Meltzer, you became an enemy of WWE back then as well. But they've opened up. I mean, they do these press conferences audio press conferences before the NXT takeover shows, and Dave is part of that as well. So whoever would have thought that even I would be back in. We were banned from the WWE for ages, shooting pictures and everything when they had their own magazine. And it was a business move. It was nothing. Vince Jr. assured me it was nothing personal. It was business on their part. But whoever thought that I'd be on the WWE network, or Dave Meltzer would be one of the people joining in on an NXT press conference.
That's true. It's true. I think it's only a matter of time before they bring you in, because if they have Vince Sr.'s chauffeur in there in the Hall of Fame, I think that's as much of a weird thing, a weird submission as anything else. So I think to get a legit journalist in there that covered wrestling during the heyday of the glory years, I think it's a no-brainer to have you in there.
Yeah, like I said, if I go in, George should be right next to me, too. Yeah. And, I always say this, that I was a part of like 5 or 6 great teams that put the magazines together. But I was the guy, and a lot of times Craig Peters was with me, I was the guy out in the field that the fans threw things at to get down when I was blocking their view around the ring. I was the guy that was doing the interviews. But more so than anything, more importantly than any columns I wrote, any picture I shot, was that the guys in the business accepted me as one of their own. So my old Rolodex, which unfortunately most of you can't see except you two can, it's still on my desk as part of my memorabilia. My old Rolodex and my contacts really was the most important part of what I did, because I was really the liaison between the very closed business of professional wrestling and the magazines.
Very cool. Very cool. So you had kind of brought up some of today's product, and that was one of my next questions, is what are you a fan of today, or are you a fan of very much today?
I'm a fan of all of it today. I watch Raw every Monday night. I watch SmackDown every Tuesday night. I try and catch as much of the shows on the network as I can. I watch Impact Wrestling. The thing is that I'd love to be able to sit home and do that all day, but there's just not enough time in my day to be the editor of OneWrestling.com, work ahead, take care of my poodle, talk to my kids, who one is in Florida and one is in New York, and have my wife ask me to take the garbage out. Mm-hmm. So, there's just not enough time for me to watch everything. I've always been a fan, and it's amazing when somebody comes out with a mask, and you can see a lot of the masks behind me here. And for those of you who can only hear this, you can dream of the masks behind me. But
newsflash, they're Lucha Libre masks.
Yes. Well, no, one of them is the mask of Mr. Wrestling number 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
it
is.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And by the way, just as an aside, he's been a very close friend of mine forever, and I finally figured out what his character was. Do you guys remember Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the voice was, your mother's not coming here tonight, Alice. You're going bam, zoom, right to the moon, Alice. So Mr. Wrestling number 2 was the same. It was Tommy Rich, Friday night, Bam, zoom, you're going to the moon, boy.
I never thought of that.
So anyway, but getting back to what we were saying here, was that I'm a fan of all of it, and but I've always loved if a guy comes out in a mask, he's got my attention fully. I always liked when I was growing up the flying wrestlers were all other than Buddy Rogers because he never flew, but the flying wrestlers were my favorites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we talk about that on the podcast all the time, about how the fact that we have access to so much more product now than we ever did. You could literally watch TV pretty much 24 hours a day with all the product that we have access to these days between the network and New Japan and everything else. And
that would have been a dream. When I was growing up, I bought the magazines, and I saw wrestlers that I never knew existed from the magazines. We were the Internet before the Internet, actually.
Right.
And at least for wrestling.
I never knew who Carlos Colon was until you guys had him all plastered all over the pages.
Yeah. And, I remember when Paul Jones, Broadway Paul Jones, came to Madison Square Garden, and he and I had lunch that afternoon. He had come in from Charlotte, North Carolina. He was wrestling for Jim Crockett Promotions. And he said when he went to the Garden, fans came over to him with the magazine outside the employees' entrance where people would go in. And he says, I can't believe what the magazines did. People in New York knew who I was because of the magazines. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to be right back with Bill Apter and my co-host for today, Lance LeVine. Hey, I hope everyone's enjoying this episode of Shootin' the Shiznit. What I want you to do is join us this Thursday, that's right, this Thursday, for the Cool Kids Countdown, the special edition. Yes, I will be joined by my regular co-host there, Lance LeVine, as we count down. Well, you'll just have to wait till Thursday. What? That's right, wait till this Thursday for the Cool Kids Countdown. All right, guys, we're back. Hey, Bill, I've always wondered this, and you touched this in the book, and I read it in the book, but I guess people in the inside was always of the belief that you guys decided that y'all all had like 12 people or 13 people, and you all guys decided who was going to be Wrestler of the Year, who was going to be Tag Team of the Year. And that rumor got out that, hey, Bill likes Dusty better this year. Dusty's going to get, But tell us the process that it actually went through as it come through your office there.
Yeah, that's a great question. But we started getting mail early on after the balloting. You could tell pretty early on after you got, between 300 and 500 pieces of mail during the week that where this thing was going. A lot of people said, well, Bill likes Dusty Rhodes, Bill likes Mil Mascaras, Bill likes Bruno Sammartino. The mentality at the office was, this is from the publisher, that you put people on the cover who are going to sell magazines. The publisher was in the business to sell magazines. He wasn't in the wrestling business. Right. But the people that we did the awards with were people that were on the national stage pretty much. They were on cable TV. I mean, Dusty Rhodes was on, when I was, even before cable, I got the Spanish stations in New York, and we got Florida Championship Wrestling, so Dusty Rhodes was on there. But Dusty was also wrestling in 6 or 7 other territories. So, of course, that he would be a perfect choice if the mail actually came in that way. If the mail would come in that was an unknown, we'd have to really think about that. But the guys that were higher up were the guys that were in the main events in the various territories. So no, there wasn't any, well, Bill likes this guy, or Stu Sachs likes this guy, or Craig Peters liked that guy. It didn't work that way. It was, who's really getting the most votes. The numbers were inflated.
True, yeah, I figured that, yeah.
But the choices were very clear because there was also guys that we kept pumping away in the magazines.
It's funny that you say that, because to me, after you go back to look at the magazines, you guys made stars. You guys put over people that were, I was excited to see Jerry Lawler on a cover or something like that, because Jerry Lawler was, Memphis Wrestling, growing up on Memphis Wrestling. But you guys made him more popular by just putting him on the cover of a show.
Oh, yes. Jerry Lawler was a great promotional machine. Jerry Lawler always sent us photos, always called me. We always talked. But now you touched on something that's very important, because you mentioned how the magazines helped create the image of the stars. So once a year, I get very upset. And it's something we talked about a few minutes ago, the WWE Hall of Fame. Every wrestler but two, get up there and they thank everyone from Vince McMahon Sr. to Jr. to the production people and all that, to the janitor in the building, but none of them, except two people, ever got up and said, I want to thank the wrestling magazines for helping me in my career. Because otherwise, back then, nobody would have known who they were, except in their local territories. We put them on a national stage, and it irks me every year that none of them, the only two people that did it to date were Mil Mascaras and Jerry Lawler. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson saw me at a party before they went out, and they said, you guys helped make us. We're going to talk about it. But when they got out there, it was so, and they talked about this on a video, on One Wrestling Video. They got so fatuzzled, half the things they wanted to say, they forgot. And they came over to me afterwards, and they were like, oh, my God, Bill, can you forgive? Yes, I forgive them, because they wanted to do that. But some of the major stars that get the WWE Hall of Fame recognition, it was the magazines, not just because they weren't even in WWE at that point, but it was the magazines that made them get out there to a national audience.
I agree. I think what was really funny at one time is that you had all these guys that, I got 3 channels. And I was out in the country, and I got Channel 5 out of Memphis, and I had to go outside and turn the antenna so I could watch.
By the way, you guys took a 1-minute break, so hold on a minute. This is my tic-tac break.
Oh, okay.
You can tell when people are walking, they have tic-tacs. Okay.
For those of you who can't see this, it's really tic-tacs.
Yeah.
But my question was with I didn't even know how to pronounce the guys' names. It was so funny. It was like Ted DiBiase. It was like you had built Ted DiBiase up, and he was like one of my favorite wrestlers in the magazine, but I had never seen him wrestle. And that's kind of like, that was the weirdness of it. You could be a fan of a wrestler that you had never, his name to me was Ted DiBiase or something. I had no idea,
You mean it's not?
But that is the weird thing. You guys made stars out of people that we never even got to see wrestle because of the stories you wrote. That was just, after you go back and read some of them, you're like, well, you had to be a fan of, And then when he turned bad, I couldn't believe he turned bad, but that story, and what got me sometimes, and I don't know, you could tell me why this happened. Sometimes you guys would have a story going that kind of sounded like maybe they went in a different direction than they told you they were going in. Is that what would happen?
Well, most times they didn't tell us where they were going. Most times we would get a great set of photos, and we'd have an editorial meeting, and we would come up with a possible angle, and then call the wrestler or call the promoter and say, we want to go with this. And 9 out of 10 times they just said fine. They may not have played it on TV, the same angle or anything to do with it, but generally we let them know what was coming many times. And a lot of the wrestlers would say to us, can we do an interview? They'd say, listen, you guys just stay in my character. You do better than we do. Yeah.
There were times reading some of those interviews that I thought, there is no way. I mean, this is just like somebody writing this as Ted DiBiase or as Hacksaw Jim Duggan,
But you were never really sure.
Right. It sounded better than the real thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I remember, Lawler kind of keyed me in. I guess I was like 16 years old, and there was a letter to the editor that Jerry Lawler was supposed to have wrote, it was supposed to be, he was upset because y'all didn't do something. He was turning heel at the time, and he was doing a personal appearance.
Wait. You mean he was going to become a rule breaker?
Oh, I'm sorry, a rule breaker. That's right.
A rudo.
But he said, I said, what made you write that letter? And he goes, man, I didn't write that like that. And then at that point, I was thinking to myself,
wait a minute. Had we known that back then, we would have said that he had amnesia. See?
What is? You said you were the face of it, and of the magazines, but how does it feel? Because they weren't wrestling magazines. They turned from wrestling magazines, and they still, when I see them see Pro Wrestling Illustrated, I think, in any other wrestling magazine on the newsstand, I say to myself, there's an aftermag. How did it feel that it? Yeah, tell us what happened there. Yeah.
Dave Meltzer, you started calling them the aftermags, and I used to call Dave. And I like Dave. Dave's a great guy. I used to call Dave and say, could you please not do that? Because, first of all, Stanley Weston created the magazines, but I'm just part of a team here. There are editors here writing stories, the art department. There's so much that goes on here, but I'm the guy pretty much out in the field. And he says, well, you're the guy that everybody sees on TV, so you're associated with it, so that's why he called them the aftermags. And
you were the face of it. You were the face that we all saw on TV.
Which is better than being the tuchus of it. So that's good. Thank you.
Lance had a great question. Lance, ask him the Meltzer question.
Yeah, so interesting that you brought him up. I always looked at it back in the day. I always looked at it. I bought, I subscribed to the Observer, and I bought you guys on the newsstand. And I always considered it a package deal because I had Meltzer that would provide the inside news. And then, honestly, when friends of mine who were, smart fans at the time, they're like, why do you still buy the magazine? I'm like, A, I still like the magazine, and B, I love the pictures. I mean, I love having the photographs to accompany the news from Meltzer. So how did you guys view Meltzer at the time? Was there animosity between the two? Because
not at all.
Different genres?
No, not at all. Dave, we used to share results with him. There was always a great relationship there. When we did the PWI Weekly, we would call him or he would call us, and we would exchange results that we'd use in the magazine, and he'd use it in his newsletter. Cool. We always had a great relationship with Dave. It was never an issue, but we couldn't let on that Apter was talking to Dave Meltzer, because then promoters might say, kayfabe Apter, So I built up trust in the wrestling business with the guys, because they never talked behind people's backs. One of the things that people ask me today, people that are doing wrestling on the internet, is, man, I'm trying to get well-known like you, and I'm writing good stories and all this kind of stuff, and I'll look at some of the stuff, and I'll say, you know what you're doing? If you want to be accepted by the people in the business, don't piss people off. I mean, you're writing here telling people that this match in WWE or Impact Wrestling sucked. There's a way to say that in a nice tone that you don't sound like a wise guy. So be careful. Don't piss people off. First of all, if you're writing about wrestling, it's because hopefully you like the business. So why knock it?
Good point. I don't know how much time we had left, BT, but I had
not much, but go ahead. Ask him what you got.
I had the PWI 500. I know you were there for the beginning of that. And that every time that comes out, that sparks so much conversation. And that's what any list is designed to do, is get people pissed off and disagreeing with each other. So what were some of the more bizarre antics that came along with that to scrounge up 500 guys and any behind the scenes stuff that was kind of weird?
I'm going to tell you a story that I've never told before. So all the editors would come into the room, and we would sit down for a few days talking about mainly like the top 25 to maybe 50. And most of the time, there would be the guys that were in the United States, because again, we were covering international stuff, but that's not where the magazines were selling. So, you have to consider who your audience is. So probably year 4 or 5, we had a guest wrestler who was very smart come in to be on the committee. And I'm not going to mention his name because I promised him I would never do this. And I set up with him something that we were going to do, and let's see what would happen. So we're all in the meeting there, Stu Sachs, Craig Peters, Danny Shockett back then, Joe Bua, a bunch of people. And this is what I set up with this guy. He said, okay, who do you guys feel should be number 1? And this guy comes up with like a practical unknown Japanese wrestler. So I look at him and I said, we brought you in here because you're intelligent and all that, but how the hell could you choose this guy for number 1? The guy sucks. So actually I said stinks. So he starts really getting, on the case, trying to prove it. And Stu's looking at me like, what's Bill doing? Because Stu was the main man at that point, and he still is. So this keeps going on for a few minutes. I said, you know what? I looked at this guy, and I said, you're a jackass. Now, why don't you just get up? And Stu says, Bill, what? Let's get out of the conference room and cool down. So Stu and I get outside the conference room. He says, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? This guy's a guest of ours. We asked him to come up, and I said, Stu, you know what? What? I said, you've just been worked. Ha ha. Yeah, I never told that story to anyone.
Very cool.
It was absolutely great. But whoever that Japanese wrestler was did not make it to the...
So he wasn't Mr. Irrelevant? He didn't make number 500?
Yes, that was it, Mr. Irrelevant.
Mr. Irrelevant.
There's no spell check, so I wasn't sure I could spell irrelevant back then. So, but the after you got to like the 200th person, everybody kind of like was the same until you got to number 500. And the 2 most important places in that list were, of course, number 1 and number 500. Donnie Allen, who was one of our first number 500s, he still has T-shirts. Very proud of that. So
awesome. Hey, Bill, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Lance, thanks for co-hosting and helping out. It was really, and I know probably somewhere down the line we're going to think of some bunch of other questions.
Oh, I would love to do this again, and of course, I have to plug.
Yes, plug your stuff. That's all we say. Plug your shiznit.
Wait, that's terrible to tell a guy to go plug yourself. Wow.
We're not. They can't see the video, so it's okay.
That's right. I wouldn't want to see that video. But my book is Wrestling Fixed. What's the answer, guys?
I didn't know it was broken.
That's correct. We'll be 2 years old in October. So it's
and I'm not just saying this because you're on here, Bill, but it was, and I told Lance this, that it was one of those books where I started and I just kept reading, and every moment that I had free, I was reading it because it brought back, it kind of like, behind the scenes of the magazine as a kid, and I loved it. I loved the book, and you send the money to my PayPal.
Got it. No, but it's I will do that. $8.96 you're up to. So I wrote the book to be a quick read. Jim Cornette said it best when he says, I read Bill Apter's book, and he goddamn doesn't bury anyone. What's wrong with him? I just wanted it to be a fun book. And there's also the audio version where I did the voice. I did it, and originally they were going to hire an announcer, and they had the announcer call me, and I said, I'm a professional broadcaster. I could do it. And the announcer said, no, listen, I'm the one who's going to read your book. And I was like, you're not. Wrong voice. So they had another guy call me, oh, hi, Mr. Apter. And then I started listening to some of the audiobooks where the wrestlers didn't do it. They had the Dusty Rhodes audiobook. My name's Dusty Rhodes. I said, there's no deal unless I do the voice. So I wound up doing it. So the audiobook is available. Also, OneWrestling.com. I post stuff there every day, along with Big Ray Hernandez and Jesse Shannon and John Osting and so many others. And please subscribe to One Wrestling Video. That's the number one, not the word. OneWrestlingVideo.com. That's where all the wrestling video interviews that I've done for so many years are housed. And I was the first guy, but people don't know this, I was the first guy to put wrestling interview videos on the internet. No one else had done it before OneWrestling.com. I'm a video hobbyist, and I figured it out, and I was the first guy to do it.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you again, Bill. Thank you, Lance.
Guys, me shoot the shiznit, and I'll see you guys at the matches.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot,
so much,
Bill.
At Twitter, at Apter One Wrestling, and thank you, guys. It was a pleasure to talk with both of you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Same bat time, same bat channel next week. The best little wrestling podcast in the business. That was my tagline there, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought we were off.
Thank you, man. That was great.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Let's do it. I would love to do it again.
Thanks a lot. I'll let you know when it comes out. I appreciate all the plugs and everything.
Also, I enjoyed doing this very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much.
See you, Lance. Y'all guys have a good night. I'm going to watch the game
gentlemen.
now.
LeVine.
Yeah,
LeVine.
LeVine.
Hey, Lance, you still